So I want to start here. We're going to talk about what's going on in the pandemic in our respective countries and some other things as well. But I got to say, and I'm curious your take on this. When Jeremy Corbyn lost, and I was following it from the States, I was watching a lot of your guys' media, and I know the BBC has its problems, and you talk a lot about those problems. But in my experience and what exposure I've had, your media is nowhere close to as bad as ours. Like it doesn't even feign a candle. Like ours is so much more terrible. Like even on its worst day, the BBC is still better than the corporate media in the United States. Would you agree with that?
Well, yes, but what you've got to understand, Ron, is when did CNN start? Like 1992, something like that, 1988. That's when CNN started. The BBC started 100 years ago or something like that. So they've had a century of practice on propaganda. So it's a hell of a lot more subtle over in the UK. Whereas in the US, you just get it full on in your face like you do with basically everything else.
But it's all right. So I'll give you, for instance, there was this journalist over in the UK, and I think it was just a BBC radio broadcast that I was listening to, but I was able to stream it online. And they were comparing some of the unlikely areas where Boris Johnson won. And they were saying, this is kind of similar to the way Trump won in Pennsylvania over in the United States. Mm-hmm. That would never happen in the corporate media in the United States. I could never imagine Chuck Todd being like, yeah, and that's just like how when Boris Johnson won over in Slaw, that's the same thing. Like they would never be able to make that type of comparison. I mean, I think, if we're going to go with Chuck Todd as for instance, I would not be surprised, and I'm not even embellishing here, I would not be surprised if that guy didn't know who Labour and the Tories were. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't know what that meant. If you were just like, what are Labour and the Tories? He's like, is that a Dickens novel? What are we talking about? I wouldn't be shocked if he didn't know. Right. I'm serious.
Chuck Todd is a rocket scientist. Chuck Todd is Elon Musk level of intelligence. Is Chuck Todd? No, it's. I must admit there have been times. I mean, I'm fascinated by American politics. I have been ever since I started my channel. I mean, when I started my channel back in 2017, we had our Prime Minister, our leader Theresa May, was talking about the most naughty thing that she'd ever done, and she was talking about running through fields of wheat, a farmer's fields of wheat. Whereas at the same time in America, all the news was about Stormy Daniels beating the president on the backside with a copy of Time magazine, I think it was, or something like that. So everything that we do is generally kind of on low key, and then America just tends to be bigger and better. Well, not necessarily always better, I suppose. It's fascinating though watching.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your